The European Union continues to indirectly import Russian oil despite the sanctions imposed. Critics call this the EU's empty scare strategy against Russia. This happens mostly through a loophole associated with intermediary countries such as China, India, Turkey, the UAE, and Singapore. These countries buy Russian crude oil, refine it into various petroleum products, and then sell them to the EU and other Western countries. The Center for Energy and Clean Air Research has identified these 5 countries as the main middlemen. This scheme allows Russian oil to legally enter the EU market because sanctions only apply to crude oil, not refined products. This loophole allows the EU to remain one of the largest importers of Russian-origin oil products, thereby undermining the intended impact of sanctions on Russia's oil revenues. In 2023, it is estimated that the EU indirectly imported about 35 million barrels of Russian oil through intermediaries, bringing significant tax revenues to the Kremlin's budget. These indirect imports of Russian oil demonstrate the difficulties in fully enforcing sanctions and cutting off the financial flows that go to support Russia's military actions. While the EU has not explicitly imposed sanctions on indirect Russian oil imports, it has been criticized for not effectively closing these loopholes. Some analysts argue that the EU is aware of these indirect supplies, but seeks to balance the sanctions regime with practical energy needs and economic stability. The EU's dependence on imported energy forces it to balance sanctions with the need to ensure stable and affordable energy supplies for its member states. This strategy helps the EU avoid serious economic shocks and energy crises that could arise in the event of a complete withdrawal from Russian energy resources. Regarding the scope of EU sanctions, Russian crude oil exports by sea initially fell by 35% after the embargo was imposed. However, these shipments subsequently recovered as Russia reoriented its oil exports to non-sanctioned countries such as China and India. The share of Russian oil in total EU imports fell sharply from 30% in Q1 2022 to just 3% in Q1 2024. This decline was offset by increased imports from countries such as the US, Norway, and Saudi Arabia. The total value of EU fossil fuel imports from Russia in January 2024 was 0.8 billion euros for pipeline gas, 0.7 billion euros for LNG, 0.6 billion euros for crude oil, and 0.09 billion euros for oil products. Despite the sanctions, Russia managed to maintain oil export volumes by reorienting supplies to Asian markets. At the same time, Russian crude oil and refined products were sold at significant discounts. In some periods, Urals was trading below $40 per barrel compared to the price ceiling of $60. Continued EU imports of oil products, directly or indirectly through countries such as India and Turkey, provide Russia with substantial revenues, undermining the full effect of the sanctions. The EU's 13th package of sanctions, adopted in February 2024, expanded restrictions on individuals and organizations associated with the Russian military-industrial complex. These measures are designed to limit Russia's access to military technology and close loopholes in the sanctions already in place. Overall, although EU sanctions have changed the direction of Russian oil export flows and reduced direct imports, the existence of loopholes and indirect trade routes allows Russian oil to still reach EU markets, ensuring that Russia maintains a certain level of oil revenues. The BRICS countries play an important role in helping Russia circumvent EU sanctions, thereby mitigating their impact on the Russian economy. This support comes in a variety of ways. China and India have become key markets for Russian exports, especially in the energy sector. For example, China accounts for about 53% of Russia's crude oil exports in 2024. India has also significantly increased its imports of Russian crude oil, refining it domestically and often exporting already refined products to other regions, including the EU. BRICS countries are developing alternative financial systems to reduce reliance on Western networks, often used to enforce sanctions. Initiatives like the BRICS payment system and the increased use of national currencies in trade settlements allow Russia to circumvent restrictions imposed by SWIFT and other Western financial institutions. Russia has several long-term trade agreements with BRICS countries, ensuring a steady flow of goods and resources. These agreements cover energy supplies, agricultural products, and cooperation in technology, providing Russia with sustainable economic ties beyond Western influence. Economic support from the BRICS countries helps Russia mitigate the downturn that could have occurred due to EU sanctions. By redirecting exports to the BRICS countries, Russia maintains its revenue streams. For example, although Russia's oil export revenues have declined from their peaks, they remain substantial due to continued trade with China and India. China, through its Belt and Road Initiative, has invested significantly in infrastructure projects in Russia, increasing connectivity and creating new trade routes. These investments are strengthening Russia's economic infrastructure and opening up new opportunities for trade. The BRICS countries also provide Russia with political and diplomatic support on international platforms, countering Western rhetoric and sanctions. This collective position helps Russia maintain a degree of legitimacy and influence in world affairs. Thus, BRICS support is crucial for Russia to overcome the challenges posed by EU sanctions. By diversifying trade, developing alternative financial systems, entering into long-term agreements, and receiving political support, Russia can mitigate the negative effects of sanctions, support its economy, and maintain its geopolitical influence. This cooperation underscores the strategic importance of the BRICS in the global economic and political landscape. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it useful and interesting, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support is very important to us and motivates us to create new and exciting content. Also, leave your thoughts and feedback in the comments. Your feedback helps us to become better. Have a great day and a great mood.